Hello and welcome back to the series of History of English Literature. In our last video, we explored the heights of the Elizabethan Golden Age. But as the 17th century proceeded, the literary landscape of England underwent a profound transformation. Today, we are diving deep into the Jacobean and Caroline eras, a period marked by intense political instability, religious friction, and an overarching sense of cynicism that deeply mirrored the changing political situation. When James VI of Scotland came to the English throne as James I in 1603, the initial Elizabethan optimism began to soar. The political atmosphere grew tense with events like the Gunpowder Plot of 1605. This skepticism deepened even further when his son Charles I took the throne in 1625. Charles' belief in the divine rights of kings, his clashes with heavily Puritan Parliament, and his decision to rule without Parliament for 11 years plunged England into absolute chaos, ultimately leading to the English Civil War in 1642. As the country fractured politically, literature fractured too. Drama and plays slowly started to lose their quality and popularity compared to the golden age of Shakespeare. Every great writer of the time felt the impact of the changing world, but the two towering figures stood at the center of the literary shift: Ben Jonson and John Donne. Their immense influence and contribution completely redirected the course of English drama and poetry. Let's first look at Ben Jonson. Johnson brought a rigorous classical discipline to an otherwise chaotic theatre scene. He championed neoclassical rules and introduced the comedy of humors, a dramatic technique where characters are governed by an excess of specific psychological or physical trait, exposing human vice and social pretense. Let's discuss about his major works. First is Volpone or the Fox. This dark, masterful satire centers on a wealthy, childless Venetian nobleman who, out of sheer greed and malice, fakes a deadly illness to exploit a group of sycophants who shower him with luxury gifts in hope of becoming his heir. Johnson gives his characters animal traits to expose the wild greed and corruption in London. His second major work is The Alchemist. Set in London, abandoned due to the plague, this brilliant comedy follows a trio of con artists who transform a master's house into a fraudulent laboratory, exploiting a desperate greed of citizens by promising to create the Philosopher's Stone. The play is celebrated for its flawless classical structure and its biting expose of human gullibility. His other works include Every Man in His Humor, Every Man Out of His Humor, Bartholomew Flare, Epicene or the Silent Women, The Devil is an Ass, and his classical tragedies, Sejanus His Fall and Catiline His Conspiracy. While Johnson brought classical order to comedy, John Donne brought intellectual complexity to poetry, establishing himself as the pioneer of metaphysical movement. Donne completely rejected the smooth, idealized conventions of Elizabethan love poetry. Instead, his contribution was a style marked by colloquial language, jagged rhythms, and the use of metaphysical conceit, an elaborately intellectual, startling metaphor that links widely disparate ideas together. John Donne's major works include Songs and Sonnets. This foundational collection of love poetry completely strips away conventional romantic fluff, presenting love in all its moods, from cynical, bitter, and highly sensual to deeply spiritual and transcendent. His another major work is Holy Sonnets, composed primarily after Donne took holy orders in the Anglican Church. This intense sequence of 19 religious poems documents a passionate, agonizing personal struggle with faith, sin, mortality, and salvation, featuring dramatic, urgent openings like Better My Heart 3% God. These sonnets use vivid confrontational language to address the divine. His minor works include An Anatomy of the World, of the Progress of the Soul, and his prose masterpiece, Devotions upon Emergent Occasions. The immense influence of Donne and Johnson split the poetry of the Caroline Age into two distinct, fascinating camps. On one side, there were metaphysical poets who followed Donne's intellectual, deeply analytical approach to the mysteries of love, God, and existence. They used complex logic to probe the depths of the human soul. Metaphysical writers include George Herbert, Richard Crashaw, Henry Vaughan, Thomas Traherne, Abraham Cowley, and Andrew Marvell. On the other side, there were Cavalier poets, a group of courtier poets who gathered around King Charles I. They proudly called themselves the Sons of Ben because they adopted Ben Jonson's clean, classical restraint, balance, and lyric grace. Politically loyal to the crown, their poetry championed the theme of Carpe Diem, means seize the day, celebrating earthly pleasures, beauty, love, wine, and fellowship as their political world teetered on edge of destruction. Cavalier poets include Andrew Marvell, Robert Herrick, Thomas Carew, Sir John Suckling, Richard Lovelace, and John Cleveland. Now let's talk about the theatre, which was experiencing a slow, fascinating decline of drama. While the Elizabethan theatre focused on vast human themes and moral order, Jacobean and Caroline drama shifted towards dark sensationalism. To satisfy an increasingly cynical and anxious audience, plays become obsessed with themes of horrific vengeance, extreme violence, sexual perversion, political corruption, and psychological madness. The domestic and political anxieties of the age spilled right onto the stage. Let's look at the minor writers who, despite the changing times, contributed immense values to this evolving dramatic world. The era's most successful literary partnership was undoubtedly Francis Beaumont and John Fletcher. They achieved massive popularity by perfecting the art of tragicomedy. Let's discuss about his major work, The Maid's Tragedy. This highly sensational tragedy exposes a court corrupted by a manipulative king who forces a young nobleman into a sham marriage to cover up his own royal affair. The play unravels into a brutal cycle of broken vows, psychological torment, murder, and suicide, reflecting era's deep disillusionment with royal integrity. Their other important works include Philaster or Love Lies Bleeding, The Night of the Burning Pestle. Next, we have the absolute peak of dark, macabre Jacobean revenge tragedy with John Webster and John Marston. Webster, in particular, stands as the master of atmospheric terror and Italianate corruption. The Duchess of Malfi by John Webster. This is a haunting masterpiece centered on a noble, independent young widow who secretly marries her lower class household steward, outraging her power hungry aristocratic brothers. They subject her to an elaborate campaign of psychological torture and mental terror and eventual execution, showcasing Webster's deeply cynical view of institutional corruption and human cruelty. Other important works of Webster and Marston include Webster's The White Devil and The Devil's Law Case, Marston's The Malcontent, The Dutch Courtesan, and Antonio's Revenge. In stark contrast to this gothic bloodshed, writers like Thomas Dekker and Thomas Heywood specialized in citizen comedy and domestic drama, focusing on the vibrant daily lives of London's merchant classes. The Shoemaker's Holiday by Thomas Dekker is an energetic, cheerful citizen comedy, celebrates the industriousness and pride of London's working class shoemaker, following a nobleman who disguises himself as a Dutch craftsman to win the heart of merchant's daughter. It stands as a rare, joyful tribute to working class solidarity and community joy in transitioning literary landscape. Other important works of Thomas Heywood include A Woman Killed with Kindness, The Fair Maid of the West, and English Traveller. Then George Chapman, known for his tragedies like Bussy Dumboys and The Conspiracy and Tragedy of Charles, Duke of Byron, as well as his legendary verse translation of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. Philip Massinger, a late Caroline playwright who excelled in social satires and political commentary. His minor works include A New Way to Pay Old Debts, The City Madam, and The Roman Actor. By the late 1630s, the political cauldron in England finally boiled over. The rising Puritan movement, which dominated Parliament, viewed the theatre as an absolute hotbed of sin, vice, and royalist corruption. The graphic violence and sensational nature of Caroline plays gave them all the leverage they needed. So, in September of 1642, with the outbreak of the English Civil War, Parliament issued an official ordinance banning all public stages plays and closing the theatres. The curtains fell across England, plunging the stage into darkness for 18 years until the restoration of the monarchy in 1660. The Jacobean and Caroline ages began under the long shadow of Elizabethans, but they created striking, deeply relevant literature of their own. So, this was it for this video. Which poet or playwright from this chaotic era resonates with you the most? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video, share it with your fellow literature students, and subscribe to the channel for more comprehensive historical breakdowns. See you in the next video.